Welcome to lesson number 3 in module 2 of Open Up. This lesson is called Making Plenty of Space, and as we go through it, that'll make sense why I've used that title. Have you ever seen the film The Proposition? It's a grim and very violent western set in the Australian outback in 1880. It was filmed on location in the middle of summer. Needless to say, the actors had to battle the blistering heat and huge swarms of flies constantly buzzing around them. Of course, the actors couldn't swat at the flies since that would ruin the shot. They had to let the flies crawl on their faces without reacting. One of the actors, named Ray Winstone, and he's the guy on the right in this poster. You might know him better from the movie Hugo, where he played Uncle Claude. Well, I remember reading that Ray Winstone wondered how lions in wildlife documentaries always seem so oblivious to the flies, and soon he himself was able to let the flies just be there without bothering him. He said they felt like feathers stroking my face. That's pretty cool, right? That's a pretty big shift that he made, because normally we try as hard as we can to get rid of flies, right? We swat at them, set traps for them, spray them. But think about what Ray was able to do. He was able to defuse or separate himself from all those negative thoughts and mindfully notice the actual sensation of the flies crawling on him, which turned out to be not that bad as he expected. So why am I telling you all this? Well, no worries, I'm not gonna tell you to let flies crawl all over you, but I do want you to consider this. Suppose you could change your attitude towards your own fears and anxieties in the same way that Ray Winstone did with the flies. Suppose you could separate yourself from all the thoughts about how uncomfortable you feel or how bad things are, and instead of trying to make all those thoughts go away, you opened up to them. If you're thinking, why would I want to do that? Well, think back to what we talked about in Module 1. Trying to get rid of your fears and anxieties takes a lot of energy, a lot of time, and doesn't even end up helping you in the long run. The unpleasant thoughts just keep coming back. Plus, you can't really engage with your life when you're constantly struggling with your thoughts. Now, sometimes at this point, clients tell me again that they feel they need to reduce the anxiety first before they can do anything. I need to reduce my anxiety first before I can whatever it is that they want to do. Let me assure you that this is a myth. Research actually shows us the opposite is true. For example, a lot of studies have been done on test or exam anxiety. You'd think that the less anxious you feel, the better you would perform, right? But this actually isn't the case. What researchers notice is that most people have similar levels of anxiety when it comes to writing exams. What determined how well they performed wasn't their level of anxiety, but their ability to focus their attention. In other words, if they could fully engage in the exam, instead of getting distracted by their thoughts, they performed well no matter how anxious they were. And this doesn't just apply to test anxiety. There are a ton of studies that examine athletic performance and sexual performance. All show similar results. Athletes and lovers who engage fully in the task perform best. Those who get distracted by their thoughts and feelings perform worst. Okay, so that brings us to step 2 in the 6-step process of the Calm Living Blueprint. Open up. Open up. Instead of trying to get rid of unpleasant, anxious thoughts and feelings, we open up and accommodate to them. We make room for them and allow them to just come and go. It doesn't mean you like them or that you want them there or that you approve of them. You just stop investing your time and effort in fighting them. The more space you give those fears and anxiety, the less impact and influence they have on your life. And we call this technique expansion. Why do we use the term expansion? Well, consider some of the words we commonly use to describe feeling bad. Words like tension, stress, and strain. If you look up these words in the dictionary, you'll find that they're all connected. Tension is a state of being stretched or strained. Stress is to subject to strain or pressure, and strain is to stretch beyond the proper point or limit. All these words imply that our feelings are too big. They are pulling us apart and stretching us beyond our limits. Contrast these words with expand, which means to increase in extent, size, volume, scope, to spread, unfold, or develop. When unpleasant emotions arise, we tense up, our muscles tighten and contract. It's as if we're trying to squeeze these feelings out, to push them out of our body by sheer brute force. With expansion, we're intending the very opposite. Instead of squeezing down, we're opening up. Instead of increasing tension, we're releasing it. Instead of contracting, we're expanding. There's a wonderful ancient Indian parable that illustrates this step of opening up really well. An old Hindu master was fed up with the continual complaints from his apprentice. So one day he asked the young man, his apprentice, to fetch him a cup of water and a bowl of salt. When the young man returned, the master said, "Now tip a handful of salt into the water." The apprentice did what he was told. The master then swirled the water around in the cup until the water dissolved. "Now taste it," he said to the young man. Again, the apprentice did as he was told. "How does it taste?" the master asked him. "Horrible," said the apprentice. "Yes, very unpleasant," said the master. Then he asked the apprentice to follow him to a nearby lake. "Now tip a handful of salt into the lake." Again, the apprentice did as he was told. "Now taste the water from the lake." The apprentice drank from the lake, and this time he smiled. "Not so hard to swallow, eh?" said the master. The salt is like the inevitable pain of life. In both cases, the amount of salt is the same, but the smaller the container, the greater the bitterness. So when life gives us pain, instead of closing in around it, like this cup, we would do better to enlarge and open, like this lake. Lovely story, isn't it? It's one of my favorites. But enough story. Let's knuckle down and actually do this. So to handle any strong emotion effectively, we need to name it. And NAME is an acronym that stands for notice, acknowledge, make space, and expand awareness. Notice, acknowledge, make space, expand awareness. Let's go through each of these individually. Step 1 is to notice. Noticing or paying attention is at the heart of this technique, and really at the heart of the Calm Living Blueprint. If you recall back to diffusion, it was part of that technique as well. Just as the first step in diffusion is to notice your thoughts, the first step in expansion is to notice your feelings. So when anxiety or fear shows up in your body, notice where it is and what it feels like. Step 2 is to acknowledge. In this step, we use simple self-talk to acknowledge that the feeling is present. We silently say to ourselves something like, "I'm noticing fear," or "Here's a feeling of anxiety," or "Here's anxiety." These ways of speaking seem unnatural, but they serve a purpose. They help us to separate from the feeling to some degree. Note the difference between "here's fear" versus "I'm afraid," or "I'm noticing fear" versus "I'm scared." If we use a phrase such as "I'm noticing" or "here's a feeling of," that helps us to remember we are not our feelings. We aren't our feelings. Our feelings are transient events continually passing through us and changing like the weather. They do not define who we are or dictate what we do. Step 3 is to make space. And here we breathe into the feeling, psychologically open up and make room for it. When we breathe deeply, it helps us to anchor ourselves in the present. And when we direct our breath into and around the feeling, it helps us to drop the struggle with it. The anxiety or fear is still present, but the more space we give it, the less impact and influence it has on our behavior. And the last step, step number 4, is to expand awareness. Having created space for this feeling, we need to re-engage with the world around us. We continue to notice the feeling and simultaneously connect with the world around us so that we can do what we want to do. Okay, so that's a summary of expansion. Now let's walk through the process together so you can actually practice it in this moment as I'm helping guide you through the process. So to do this, you need to dredge up a common fear you have so you have something to work with. It could be something as simple as the fear of talking to people. Okay, so that's the example that I'm going to use, the fear of talking to people. Imagine yourself taking some sort of action towards this goal. So in my example, it might be walking up to a person that I want to start a conversation with. Okay, so imagine it as vividly as you can. What are you doing with your arms? What are you doing with your legs as you take this action? What can you see, hear, touch, taste, and smell? Imagine it as vividly as you can. And as you imagine it, see if you can get in touch with your fear. If you're having difficulty tapping into your fear merely by thinking about it, then another way is to make a firm commitment. What is one small step you will take today and a larger step you will take tomorrow that will get you moving towards your goal? Commit to this right now. You commit to this in this moment, and chances are fear is going to show up right away. And if that still doesn't do the trick, then make your commitment publicly to someone you care about, in person, by phone, or by email. Making your commitment publicly virtually guarantees you that you're going to rev up a fight or flight response. And I've also included a handout called Bringing on Bodily Sensations of Anxiety below this video that has suggestions for things that you can do to help bring about common sensations like sweating, blushing, and dry mouth so that you can practice expansion with those sensations. Okay, so please do this now as best you can. Take as long as you need to in order to get in touch with that fear. You can even pause this video right now if you need to and then come back later. Right, so I'm going to assume that you've tapped into that fear. And now we're going to name it and tame it. Take a few seconds to scan yourself from head to toe and notice all the different sensations of fear. What can you feel in your forehead, your eyes, your jaw, your mouth, your throat, your neck, your shoulders, your arms and hands, your chest, abdomen, your legs and feet. Now zoom in on the part of your body where the sensations are the strongest. Shine a bright spotlight on this part of your body and observe the sensations as if you're a curious scientist. If your mind starts to get worked up, thinking something like, I can't stand feeling this way, thank it for its comments or let it chatter away like a radio playing in the background. Notice where the feeling starts and where it stops. Is it moving or still? Is it on the surface of your body or deep inside? Notice the temperature. Notice the different elements within this feeling. Is it pulsating, vibrating, throbbing? Does it feel like a pressure? Notice every tiny detail. See if you can discover something new that you never previously noticed. Now use a few words to acknowledge your feeling by name. Say to yourself, I'm noticing fear, or here's fear. Feel free to substitute other words if fear doesn't fit for you. Anxiety, stress, tension, nerves, whatever fits best. Be sure to do it in a non-judgmental way. Remind yourself, this is a normal feeling. This is what people feel when they face a challenge. Breathe slowly and deeply. Push all the air out of your lungs, every last bit, until they are completely empty. Then pause for a second with your lungs empty and allow them to fill slowly from the bottom up. Breathe out, slowly, steadily, completely emptying out your lungs. Then as you breathe in, direct your breath into and around the feeling. Imagine your breath flowing into and around your feeling, wherever it was that you felt that sensation the strongest. As you breathe into the feeling, imagine that in some magical way, a vast space opens up inside you. Instead of closing down this feeling, trying to squash it or crush it, you open up and make room for it. You don't have to like it, want it, or approve the feeling. You simply allow it to be there. Keep those sensations under the spotlight, observing them with curiosity, and keep breathing into them. Open up little by little, progressively creating more and more space around the feeling. Remember, you're not trying to get rid of this feeling, you're simply making room for it. And if you're somewhere private, one thing that you can do that often helps is to gently place your hand over the sensations and notice the warmth flowing from your hand into your body. See if you can soften up or loosen up around the feeling. Imagine holding it gently in your hand, as if it's a tiny baby, or a rare butterfly, or a fragile, priceless artwork. Do this for as long as is required. Initially, it may take you a few minutes to really get that sense of making space, but with practice, you can do this in a few seconds. Then the final step is to expand awareness, so that as well as being aware of your feelings, you are also in touch with the world around you. So keep the spotlight on the feeling, and also start to bring up the lights on your body. Sit or stand up straight. Notice your arms, your legs, your head, your neck, and shoulders. Be aware of your body and your fear simultaneously. Now also bring up the lights on the world around you, remaining fully aware of your fear and your body. Also notice what you can see, what you can hear, touch, taste, and smell. This gives you an expansive awareness. So now you can engage in what you are doing. Alright, great work. So, in practicing expansion, the aim is to observe your emotions, not think about them. Expansion starts with noticing what we're feeling in our body and observing precisely where those sensations are located. Expansion is simple and effortless. Of course, that doesn't make it easy. No worries though, if you fell into quicksand several times a week, you'd soon be a pro at lying back and floating. And the same is true for expansion. The more you practice, the easier and more natural it becomes. As you practice expansion, one of two things will happen. Either your feelings will change or they won't. It doesn't matter either way because this technique is not about changing your feelings. It's about accepting them. If you have truly dropped the struggle with this feeling, it will have much less impact on you regardless of whether or not it changes. Now it is time to practice. It's time to take action. Read through the 4 steps of expansion that we went over, then bring to mind some major problem in your life and dwell on it for a minute or two in order to dredge up some unpleasant feelings. Once you have a feeling to work with, practice the 4 steps. When practicing this technique, it's important to have no expectations. Simply notice what happens, and if you have any problems, don't be concerned. In the next part, we're going to troubleshoot those problems together. For the first few times, you can use the Acceptance of Emotions audio MP3 to help you through the expansion process, and that's located below this video. And please use the expansion practice sheet and the struggling versus opening up action sheet to help keep track of your progress. And those are both located below this video for you to download. So in this part 1, you discovered how to accept anxiety. In the next part of this module, you'll discover how to use your anxiety and fear, how to turn it to your advantage. So all the best practicing expansion over the coming week. I look forward to hearing about how things go for you. As always, keep up the awesome work you are doing. I'm really proud of you.